Hello, everyone, and welcome to Simon's Book Club, where we'll dig into some of the best books on psychology, neuroscience, consciousness, well-being, relationships, and other ideas to help us stay connected and compassionate with others, and also with ourselves. My goal with these videos is to share the ideas from books that promote healthy communication and connection, something I know that a bunch of people struggle with, myself included. Over the past 7 videos in this series, I've been digging into How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett, who is one of the world's leading scientists when it comes to neuroscience, emotions, and affect. She's in the top 1% of cited scientists in the world. She really knows what she's talking about, and so I think that understanding her ideas is crucial in this goal of mine. I think that the more accurate my understanding of my body and my brain, the better I'll be able to interface with the world in a healthy way, right? I think that makes sense. Now, this video and the last one are departures from what I'm usually doing, as most of the times it's just me talking about my ideas from a book that I'm reading. But now I've actually got the author with me, so we can talk about these ideas from different angles and come to understand these concepts more deeply. We saw in the first interview that I was taking her metaphor of the body budget a bit too far, and how my desire to stockpile and hoard for this body budget might just be me trying to avoid challenging emotions altogether. Maybe. My thought is that I don't really deal with emotions well when my body is feeling crappy, nor does anyone else that I know for that matter. Physical health is directly tied into mental health, and when we see one suffer, both suffer. So the logic that follows for me is, if one flourishes, so will the other. And so here's another idea that I got stuck with. I understood the importance of taking care of our bodies so that our body budgets can be replenished and so that allostasis can be optimal. What I didn't really understand was why learning more emotional words would be useful in mastering our emotions. I'm of the belief that emotional concepts kind of get in the way of us connecting with others. They're messy and confusing. Our contexts and cultures and upbringings are vastly different. And so I'd like to connect with people preconceptually, as close to the essence of their experience as possible, to really know what's alive in you, rather than connecting with different concepts and ideas. Now, Lisa Feldman Barrett emphasizes the importance of learning more emotional concepts, which runs counter to what I believe in. And so I framed my question for her, and I was very surprised by the response. I was having difficulty with the idea of how learning more emotional words will help with emotional mastery, because I was only thinking of this behaviorally. Because in terms of whatever emotion somebody has, if it's anger or sadness or happiness, then the response for me usually is the same, one of like mindful presence and curiosity. Like, you're angry, oh, what are you angry about? You're sad, I'm like, oh no, what are you sad about? You're celebrating, oh great, well, what are we celebrating? And the idea is always the behavior is the same in there. So I was having difficulty seeing where learning more emotional concepts will help me. If I learned about Peya, then my behavior wouldn't really be that much different.
I don't actually believe you. I think your behavior would be different. Yeah.
Okay.
Look, the evidence is, first of all, Peya is not one thing, it's a bunch of things. Anger is not one thing, it's a bunch of things. When you say, well, behavior is the same, my guess is, Simon, that if I slapped a bunch of electrodes on you and I had you go about your day and I looked at the physiological changes associated with instances of anger, not that you have, because you don't have emotions, your brain makes emotions. If you are like most people who we've studied, then you won't have one set of physiological changes for anger. You will have a number of different ones. I mean, you might be mindful when you're angry. That might be true every time you're angry, but my guess is sometimes you're smiling, sometimes you're scowling, sometimes you're probably muttering to yourself. You know, sometimes your heart rate goes up, sometimes it goes down, sometimes it stays the same. I mean, it's not random variation, it's structured variation. But that's what we find when we study people. We don't find a single behavioral response, even within an emotion. Learning more emotion words and having a broader emotion vocabulary, more ways to make sense of the physical changes in your body in a way that's tailored effectively to the environment that you're in, the situation that you're in, is actually empirically related to all kinds of positive benefits that when we first started discovering them and reading about them, that other people's work, we were shocked. We were like, this is before we were even thinking about allostasis or body budgeting or anything to do with metabolism. We were like, what the is going on here? You know, people who are better at more precisely experiencing emotion, you know, they're cured faster. Their cancer is cured faster for certain types of cancers. Like, what? How could that you know what? We were just like shocked. And I have to tell you that I'm like a really skeptical person, even about my own data. I mean, I'm not skeptical because I'm a scientist. I'm a scientist because I'm just a skeptical person. It's like the perfect job for me. We had to figure out why. Like, how could this possibly help? And it turns out it helps in a lot of ways, because what concepts are tools. They're tools for managing action inside your body, the actions inside your body, and also your physical skeletal motor actions. And they're also tools for communicating with other people who will either, add a savings or add a savings to your body budget, or add a burden, make a withdrawal.
So everything you're saying makes sense. I do feel a little bit of resistance to this because I do practice mindfulness a lot, and I am like kind of steeped in Buddhism as well. And I do think about, how they, you get to a point eventually in which you don't feel emotions, in which you are not agitated or activated by any of this. There's just the one taste of all experiences, and you approach each emotional situation with the same kind of mindfulness and clarity. And even though I might not reach that point yet, and if you put the electrodes on me, I'll probably show you that I don't have that level yet, but that's something that seems to be promised in the literature. And I'm not sure how that aligns.
Yeah. So again, I would say, I don't know what flavor of Buddhism that you're practicing, but there isn't one contemplative practice. There are many. And mindfulness, there are also many understandings of what mindfulness is. So let me just tell you that classic Buddhist philosophy, like the Abhidharma, what the Dalai Lama follows, would not say that you feel no emotions when you are enlightened. Okay? Because in the Abhidharma, the self is a fiction, but emotions are dharmas. They are elemental features of consciousness which cannot be dissolved. So in the Abhidharma, the classic version of Buddhism, you don't dissolve emotions into nothing. You just don't grasp at them. You just observe. If you're being mindful, you're just observing them as they flow. As consciousness flows, you just observe them and you don't grasp at them. You don't ask why, you don't ask what, you don't ask how, you just let them flow, but you don't dissolve them because they're dharmas. However, there's another version of Buddhism, which was revised later by, I think the scholar that I'm most familiar with is Dharmakirti. And I should say that my colleague, John Dunn, who is an expert, he's at the University of Wisconsin, he's an expert in Buddhist philosophy.
You did a podcast with him, right?
Yes.
Yes, I heard that one.
Taught me, I mean, all the mistakes are mine. Anything I know about Buddhism is because of him and because of my colleagues, Christy Wilson Mendenhall and Larry Barcelo. So the trio, those guys, they taught me a lot. And but all mistakes of interpretation are mine. But anything I tell that's actually accurate is due to them. Okay.
Okay.
And
fair enough.
But Dharmakirti is interesting because his writings basically said, no, dharmas are not elemental units of consciousness that are indivisible. Dharmas are actually made with human concepts. I mean, he literally said this. And I think it's like the second, I can't remember if it's the 2nd century, the 7th century, but basically a couple of 100 years later. He basically said, oh, dharmas can be dissolved. They're dissolved in the same way that any experience is dissolved, because dharmas are made with human concepts. And so if you throw the concept away, then you dissolve things into sensations. And so there is a version of mindfulness meditation which also focuses on trying to reduce your experiences to their most basic sensory parts. Emotions are the way you make meaning of sensations with concepts. So if you are effective at removing the concepts, then you experience sensations. And so the example, maybe you've seen me give this example on podcasts, the glass of water example, or painting a glass of water. If you've seen me,
I saw the painting one. Yeah, the painting one.
So it's very similar. I mean, basically, that's the general idea, that what you're doing is you're changing how you conceptualize to try to get as close to sensory features as possible, not a fully conceptualized meaning of what those features mean about you in relation to the world. It's possible to turn a very unpleasant emotion into just, a beating heart and a racing heart and sweaty palms.
You just raised a point there that I was interested in, and it seems like we started talking about valence for a second, in which you could experience a sensation which you typically describe or you would experience as negative, but then you can change the valence on that afterwards to positive. Because I've heard of anxiety reappraisal before, or anxious reappraisal, in which like you feel butterflies in your stomach, and instead of saying like, this is because I'm going to fail, you could say, this is because I'm excited that I'm going to be on stage and able to present myself. So how does changing valence for similar situations work, or is there anything that we could work with there?
When you're asking me how does it work, are you asking me what is the computational process by which the brain translates? I don't think anybody can answer that question for you.
Not yet. Okay.
No,
all right.
No.
Okay.
Because all we really know is that affect is tied or yoked to your brain's modeling of the sensory state of your body. And we can change the sensory state of your body. We can change your brain's model of what it believes is going on in your body, and we can change affect. So we know they're related. Helen Mayberg, who is a neuroscientist and a neurologist, she does deep brain stimulation for depression. She can stimulate a region of the brain that is anatomically and functionally known, experimentally known to regulate the body. She can stimulate that area and completely change on and off, like a light switch, someone's mood. So we know that they're related, but how they're related, exactly the computational layout for how they're related, good luck. If anybody who tells you they know, maybe they know a little bit of that equation, but nobody knows. That is a basic question of consciousness that nobody has answered, because it's a very, very big question. However, it does happen. There are a number of papers which show that it works, with very, very significant tangible consequences for people in terms of like the trajectory of economic savings for the economic earnings for the rest of their life. And I watched it in my own life, in my own kid. I'm sure you've heard me talk about this, getting the butterflies flying in formation. I don't know if you've ever tried it. If you haven't, you should. It's pretty remarkable, but it's harder than you might like. It doesn't work instantaneously. You have to really practice. Remember before you asked me, why would you ever learn a new language? Why would you? Well, this is something where you have to practice. And eventually it becomes more automatic that you can just switch into it. But and maybe eventually even it becomes the first prediction that your brain makes. I don't know. But I don't think we really know that. But it is possible to change your experience by changing how your brain makes sense of what the sensory signals mean.
Okay.
You don't seem convinced.
I don't know. Like I'm still trying. I'm very interested in affect. Because I've been really fascinated by your explanation of alexithymia or alexithymia. I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
Alexithymia.
Alexithymia. And I think, for me personally, I have difficulty in understanding people's emotions, but sensations I could definitely get in touch with. And I could understand my sensations a lot more than I could understand the emotions that I feel. And so I wondered where valence comes in and how the circumplex kind of works. And I've been using circumplex as a tool. Oh, yes, please help me there.
Yeah. So, so first let me say that I don't know whether you're alexithymic or not. And it's not like an all or none thing, right? It's everything is on a continuum. So, but here's what I'll say. If you don't have the concepts to make meaning of the sensory signals that your brain is receiving sensory signals from the surfaces of your body and inside your body, all the sensory surfaces sending sense data, and then your brain is creating sensations and making meaning of those sensations. Okay. If you don't have concepts to make meaning, you'll just feel affect. You'll just feel the consequence, the mood consequence of the sensations, and you won't feel any of the more detailed aspects because you aren't conceptualizing them. And so alexithymia is not the inability to read other people's emotions, because we don't read people's emotions anyways. We guess at them with our concepts. It's the knowing of concepts and the use of concepts. An person who is high in alexithymia doesn't have a lot of emotion concepts, and the concepts they do have are not as detailed and flexible. They're more, they're simpler. And your experience that isn't directly linked to the environment. You don't know, like when you feel bad, what do you do about that? What caused it? It could be any number of things, meaning the uncertainty is very high because it wasn't able to construct a concept predictively in order to make sense of it. That's why we have concepts. That's why we predict. It's in order to make sense of things, to reduce uncertainty. So alexithymia is it's a difficult condition to be in because you can't conceptualize in a way that's tailored to your environment. And I will also say that, in our culture, we value conceptualizing. We really value experiencing sensations as emotions. And if you experience sensations as emotions, you're considered healthy. And if you don't, you are given a diagnosis.
It's true.
Yeah. You're somatizing, for example. You're experiencing emotion as a physical symptom. That's incorrect. It's incorrect for two reasons. One, because sometimes it's actually better to experience things as sensations and not as emotions, as I discuss in my book. Sometimes you want to dissolve emotion into its component parts, some of which are sensations. Sometimes that's better for you. In fact, my daughter came up with a whole concept for this. She calls it the emotional flu. And what she calls the emotional flu is she feels like shit. Physically, she feels like shit. But she knows it's not depression. She's just fatigued and she's really, really tired and everything feels bad, but nothing's wrong with the world. Nothing's wrong with her life. She just feels bad. And so instead of coming to me and saying, Mom, I'm depressed, which would, if she's experiencing depression, she's experiencing it as depression. And of course, I'm not talking about a major depressive episode here, but she's going to do certain things. And if she's experiencing it as emotional flu, like, I'm just my body budget is like out of whack today, then she's going to do different things. And, so that's an example of sometimes the most emotionally intelligent thing to do is dissolve emotion into sensations and deal with the sensations. But
and
I would
to
also
replenish a body budget, I would imagine at that time. Yeah.
Like, okay, if I wait, I'm having the emotional flu, I better make sure I get a lot of sleep. I probably shouldn't stress myself today too much. Just sort
go
of
get some sunshine, touch some grass, do some self-care and take everybody.
Yeah, exactly. But I just think it's really disrespectful to people.
That's it.
I think it's really, it sort of doesn't, first of all, it doesn't recognize the fact that there's neurodiversity and that diversity is valuable. And the second, pathologize it. And the second thing is, there are cultures in this world, okay, that don't distinguish between emotions and physical symptoms, where they're really equivalent, like they're considered to be the same thing. To us, it would be like they're talking about emotions as if they're physical symptoms. They're talking about physical symptoms as if they're emotions. But in those cultures, they're just the same thing. It's like they're not different. So something that we pathologize in this culture is completely and utterly typical in another culture, which suggests that, maybe we might want to think about another way of doing it.
I agree. I definitely think we have a big mind-body distinction going on. And like, a lot of times when I'll ask people, like, if they're feeling anxious, I'll be like, okay, so how are you feeling anxious? And they'll say, well, my thoughts are racing and I'm thinking about the future. And I'll be like, okay, but where do you feel it in your body? And how do you feel in your body? How does your body know that you're anxious? And I know for me, I feel in the middle of my chest. I know some people that feel it in the back of their neck, and people manifest it differently. And I find some people have a lot of difficulty even in connecting with their body when they experience an emotion altogether.
But I will tell you something though, that right before, literally like days before the pandemic was announced, I was in New Zealand and I was there for work. But my daughter and I we had this sort of plan that every year she would meet me during spring break, her spring break. She would fly wherever I was in the world and we would have a week together. And so it was lovely. It was absolutely amazing that we had the best times. Like we were in lots of different places and I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And but this was the situation. People are getting sick everywhere. I'm in New Zealand. She gets on a plane to fly to New Zealand from Boston. And I'm thinking, are we safe? What's going to happen? Is everything going to be okay? Are we going to be able to have a vacation? Should I meet her at the airport and just turn around and go back? I mean, it's like not a short flight. Okay.
Like no, it's not.
The world is hard to know where else you could go that's further than that from here. So I called my husband and I said, her dad, and I said, I didn't say I'm anxious, which is, if I were a typical American, I would have experienced that whole physical state as anxiety. But I didn't. I said, I'm uncertain. And so I'm high arousal and it's very unpleasant.
Wonderful. I love that.
But why did I do that? Because uncertainty, what do you do in uncertainty? You approach the situation and you forage for information. You try to figure out, like, right? But what do you do in anxiety? You withdraw. You withdraw. Your mind races. You get tense. right? I mean, you sort of close in. So it matters how you conceptualize things. Now, normally, your conceptualizing is what is causing the physical changes. But it can also happen that the causation also goes in the other direction. If you change, very deliberately, effortfully change the conceptualization, you can change the physical consequences. And so I was very deliberate there. I was very deliberately not constructing anxiety, but instead experiencing those sensations as uncertainty, as evidence that things are uncertain and I don't know what the right thing is to do.
Beautiful. I love that whole concept. And I think you just kind of reaffirmed my love of the circumplex right there. If you don't know what emotion you're feeling, then plot it on the graph and let me know. I was having a discussion with a friend the other day about melancholy. And her experience of melancholy wavers back and forth between negative and positive affect. And I've never experienced it that way. Our emotional concepts are vastly different, but I feel that the circumplex is a way that we can truly understand each other if we can refer to that a lot more.
Well, I think also the circumplex is just a really good way it's like a map of your mood. For example, when people are being empathic to each other, or when there's contagion, like what's called emotional contagion, usually what it is affective contagion. Usually what it is that one person's, the affective features or properties of their experience are being communicated to another person by the tone of voice, or by the way that they're moving, or sometimes by words, and sometimes by, physical signals being synchronized, synchronizing heartbeats or breaths or what have you. So it's a very, very important part of social communication.
I gotta say, I love this conversation, and I'm super thankful to Lisa Feldman Barrett for taking the time to talk with me and to go deeper on these ideas. We moved from different interpretations of Buddhist and mindful practices to the idea of dissolving emotions into sensations, to reappraisal of affect, to talking about Alexithymia, to being taught how to pronounce that word out loud, as a matter of fact, to some great use of the circumplex. All of it was totally my jam. I love this and she offered me a lot of clarity for some of the parts of the book that I was deeply resisting. I loved that she called me out at the get-go and said that my behavior around different emotions wouldn't be the same. And I agree with her. She totally got me there. My idea before was that I handle other people's emotions with the same strategy of mindful presence and curiosity and compassion. However, that doesn't mean that my body is going to behave the same way every time. Absolutely not. I can try to hold space for people when they're having an emotional situation, any kind of emotional situation, but my body will always respond in different ways. No matter what my actions or strategy, my body will definitely feel different when I'm holding space for a loving person than it is when I hold space for an angry person. There's a big difference between the when someone is angry and my when someone is loving. And the difference is palpable. There was a really important line here. Having a broader emotional vocabulary, more ways to make sense of the physical changes in your body in a way that's tailored effectively to the environment that you're in. The situation that you're in is actually empirically related to all kinds of positive benefits. Now, that's the place where I got caught up. Now, I'm very naive here, I know, but this is an idea that I hold very dear to me. I believe, truly, that the response that's the most effective to the environment that I'm in is always and invariably to be present, mindful, curious, embodied, loving, and kind. Always. It's always the best answer. Always. From my experience, The more loving and present and kind I could be around others, the more positive benefits I receive. And I know that in the times of my life where I didn't act in accordance with these values, the less positive benefits I received. I sure f***ing know that. I think that when we handle situations with a sense of calm and grace, it's another way of saying, in the terms that were discussed in these interviews, that we aren't experiencing prediction error, that our allostasis is running optimally, and there's no expensive metabolic outlay. I think I'm applying these terms correctly. I hope so. I hope I got this right. The idea is that when we're faced with a new or challenging situation, we're experiencing prediction error. And our bodies are going to feel the prediction error with blaring signals from our interoceptive network. Some people take these signals and experience them with the added layer of emotion concepts in an attempt to make sense of the prediction error. Oh, this seems like the time that I got into a fight with my English teacher or whatever. And then we act in similar ways according to that memory. If it worked then, it'll work now, but it often doesn't. Emotion concepts, to me, sound like just repeating old patterns rather than using the prediction error as an opportunity to learn. Anyhow, I'm going to leave this video here. And now part 8 of the series of how emotions are made is done. I hope that you liked this series and that you found any of this information interesting or exciting, or in some ways challenging you to think in another way, in some way giving you a prediction error and an opportunity to learn something new. If you found any value in this program, I ask that you consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you to all of the people who are helping keeping the stream alive. I've got many more books I want to cover with many more authors that I hope to get on board for deep discussions with their ideas, and I hope to be able to cover all these books. Got a bunch right here. Supporters on Patreon get these videos ad-free and a day before they go live on YouTube. Otherwise, if you'd like to chat about these ideas some more, come join me over on the Discord, where we've been talking about the Circumplex a whole bunch and still talking about some of the other books that I did videos on, especially all about love. Come join. I'd love to see you there. And once again, I can't thank Lisa Feldman Barrett enough. Thank you so much for joining in on this conversation, for helping me understand this book more, and for really getting my prediction errors all blaring in a fun way. Look, her books are amazing. I've been so digging into them for months now. I highly recommend you check them out. How Emotions Are Made and 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. Both deeply fulfilling, awesome books. You're going to love them. Give them a read and then come on over to the Discord and let's talk about them. And until the next video, bye-bye.